Expand your mind and enrich your world. It's time for another outstanding podcast from ICRT. This is Taiwan Talk.
This is Taiwan Talk on ICRT.
Hello and welcome to another podcast edition of Taiwan Talk. I'm Keith Menconi. Taipei is one of the least affordable real estate markets in the world, and with the price of housing continuing to soar out of the reach of more and more people, more than 100 real estate experts are now forming a group called the Housing Reform Alliance to call on the government to find a solution. With pressure mounting, the Ministry of Finance and the Taipei city government recently reached an agreement to act on a set of tax reforms and policy measures that they say would curb the speculation that has led to price increases. They're also discussing ways to make more housing available. However, even the government acknowledges that any solution that depends on passing tax reforms will face an uphill battle. Today on Taiwan Talk, we're joined by one of the experts who signed on to the housing reform effort. Chang Yihua is a former National Taiwan University professor with the Graduate Institute of Building and Planning. I caught up with him at his office in Taipei for his perspective on the housing price issue. Professor Hua, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, I should say I thank you for giving me the opportunity to practice my rusty English.
So to start things off, I was hoping that you could help us understand the scale of this problem. How difficult is it to buy a house for residents of Taipei?
Well, let's be more specific. People usually use the median housing price to median household income, annual income. That ratio probably can be used to compare internationally across cities.
And this will give you a sense of how long it would take somebody to save up in order to afford a house.
Okay. In Taiwan, it's about 8. In Taipei, it's about 15. In the United States as a whole, it's only 3.5. Can you believe that? In San Francisco, which is very expensive, it's about 9 to 10. So then you know how expensive it is living in Taipei. Okay. And this trend just gradually come up and up. 6 years ago, it's about 12. It's already high enough. 5 years ago, it's about 12, that ratio. Now it's come to 15. So that's become a crisis to many people, especially young people. They could not afford it.
So as you've pointed out, it was high in Taipei 5 years ago, the price of housing, and it's even higher now. What do you think is the root cause of this issue?
Well, there are several explanations to it. From a macroeconomics point of view, first, Taiwan has the highest saving rate worldwide. It's about people save about 30% of their income compared to the United States, which about 13%. So where the money goes, then go to bank, the interest rate is quite low. The mortgage rate is very low. Here you get a mortgage rate about under 2%. In the United States, about 4.5%. So there's not of money. People try to borrow money from bank and buy the house. That's an investment rather than consumption of housing.
So it's because it's much easier to finance the house, to finance the loan that you would need to make that investment. There's a lot more of this investment going on.
That's one side of the story. The other side is the tax rate is very, very low, the property tax. In the United States, I think it varies from city to city, probably between 1 to 3% in real market value terms. Everybody in the United States, everybody is very sensitive to know how high is his tax rate, because that's a major part of the housing cost. In Taiwan, it's about we have the nominal tax rate, 1%, 1.2%, but the assessment of tax base is so low, so that makes the real tax, property tax, put the housing and land together, according to my calculation, is about 1/10 of what you have in the United States.
So what you're saying is that the assessment of the housing is much lower than the actual market value of the houses, so the tax rate also becomes lower.
That's correct. So you can see that on the one hand, it's very easy to get money from the bank, and on the other side, the very little cost to hold the property.
And then another reason is that in Taiwan, investing in real estate is a much more popular form of investment than the stock market. Is that right?
Yes, it's almost a cultural trait. People don't believe the stock market, which is up and down, and has faith in real estate, which is in the long run it will always goes up. In fact, in Taiwan, they don't have the experience of a bear market. Okay, even in Japan, up to 1990, Japanese also have the so-called myth of land value. Then felt it would never come down. Then they have the collapse in 1991. But in Taiwan, we never have that kind of experience. So people think that the trend will go on and on.
So do you think that it's just a very long-lasting bubble?
Yes, I would say so. It's an avoidable bubble, but people still don't see it yet.
And then there's also kind of a cultural aspect to it. I mean, I think that most people in Taiwan really value owning your own home.
Not only value your own home, if you can afford it, your parents come to help it. So it's almost a 2 generations investment task. So they come together. It's almost a practice that the parents give the daughter and the son the down payment, say 20%, 30%. Then the rest you go to borrow the money to pay the interest rate to buy a house on your own. So I would say people almost take the housing. Well, in the States, you buy a house mainly as consumption. The price goes up as a sideline of investment. Here, when you buy a house, the major task, so look forward for the raise the housing price. And since the cost is so low, people buy a house just like buy a piece of gold, hold away, because the low cost of holding the house. So it's a game for everybody, as long as you can afford to pay the down payment. But even that, when the young people now couldn't do it now.
So as the real estate market heats up more and more and more and the prices get higher and higher, what problems is this causing for residents of Taipei and even more broadly, Taiwanese society as a whole?
First, the price originally is the consequence, is the result of the economic growth. But in Taiwan, the housing price become an investment instrument. So the rich people really take this as an instrument for raising more money and get richer and richer. So the house in Taiwan is instrumental to the so-called skewed wealth distribution. In other words, you have the bimodal, the very poor and the very rich. It's not like a normal curve of distribution. Okay, let me put it this way: it's only you have money, you can make money. Okay, the poor people just don't have that little amount to invest. The rich people has more money, then invest more and get more money. It can become a circular, so-called positive circulation.
And so when prices are so high, it's impossible to even start an investment at all. You can't even get that first cheap house. There's nothing to start with.
So the relatively poor people just left behind, and rich people get richer and richer. And the real economic implication is that the rich people then don't spend proportionally more on domestic service and goods. They have the money invested outside, internationally, and travel around. So when the rich people get more capitals, it really slow down the economic growth because you do have less local consumption. That's one consequence. Mm-hmm. The other one is, because as I mentioned, is society is split, become a so-called housing-based inherited society. If you don't have rich parents who has 2 or 3 houses handed down to you, you'll never have a chance to buy a house.
So it really hurts social mobility.
Social mobility, that's right. And Well, I would say not only social mobility come down, but the spatial geographical mobility is hurt by the high price of housing. Think about it. If you have one house only, okay, say you bought it, say $500,000 before. Now, if your income increase, you want to buy a house, say to increase to $700,000. Now the house price goes up. You have to spend more, perhaps spend $900,000 to buy to change it. Now you can do it. Just stay stuck in the original house. Stay put. So everybody do this one. So there's reduced spatial mobility. And from my point of view, it's inefficient use of the urban space.
So you're saying that people won't be able to move from one area to another. They won't be able to move to a nicer house. What kind of problems would that cause?
Well, it's just simply to get more cost burden on change your house. So most people didn't realize that. They think, well, my house is great. The house value doubled. As long as you have one house, you don't move. If you don't want to improve your housing value. If you want to buy a house and another one, then you have double your cost.
So you're saying that people feel like they're getting wealthier and wealthier because their house is worth more, but because they have to stay in this house, that's not real wealth. They're tied to that house.
Right. In economics, you have a term called money illusion. Here we have the wealth illusion. You feel on paper you get richer, but actually you cannot realize it as long as you have to stay in a house.
What kind of problems does it cause that people can't move to different areas within Taipei? You're talking about an inefficiency of resources. What do you mean by that?
Well, suppose if you change your job, you have moved along to another place, but now you can't do it because you might spend more on the location closer to your job, so you have to stay and travel a lot more. Also, some people want to move outside the cities, but once you move outside, you can never move back. So it's also the urban, suburban, poor people cannot stay in Taipei. They have moved from the Xinjiang, from the other side, traveled an hour or so to the city. Okay, that's the problem.
So you kind of get trapped wherever you are, and even if it makes sense for you to be somewhere else, you don't have that option.
That's exactly what I mean.
So as I mentioned in the introduction, last week, both the national government and parts of the Taipei government discussed a set of policies. I'm going to run through really quick some of the things that they discussed, at least the ones that were most publicly discussed. Among those, they're talking about a number of tax reforms. One reform would be to increase taxes for property that is owned as an investment. So that's property where the owner does not live in the house. The thought being that if you increase that tax, then those houses will be less attractive as an investment. Another tax reform would be to bring up the assessment value of the houses to actual market value. So people would be paying taxes that are more in line with the market value of the housing, and that again would make real estate a less attractive investment. They also discussed boosting house supply by making more houses available on state-owned land, and also by creating tax incentives for property owners to provide housing to low-income individuals. So it's a complicated batch of proposals that they discussed. I'm curious to hear from you. Do you think that these are the kind of proposals that they should be talking about? And if these proposals were actually implemented, how far would this go towards addressing the problems that we've been discussing so far?
I would like to divide all those policy measures in three approaches. One is what you just said, the taxation. So the tax on the unused vacant house. The trouble is very difficult to identify. People put one or two people over there or switch on the lights. Weekend to record is not used or not. The tax on vacant house was proposed 20 years ago, but did not get very far. It's very hard to implement.
So what you're saying is it's really difficult for the government to tell who is really living in that house and who isn't. It's easy to fool the government, basically.
Right, that's correct. And the second one you mentioned, to to reassess the tax base, which is very, very low. That would be very fundamental, effective measures. The trouble is, the property tax is administered by local government. Local government does not have that kind of will. Okay, all the elected local officials and the councilmen, they have vested interest in property owning, so they don't want to go ahead for the reassessed tax base.
Is that because they're property owners themselves?
Yes, that's my cynical observation. Okay, revolution comes from outside, not from yourself. So that's the second part, to reassess the tax base. Besides that one, the authority in Taiwan proposed another two measures last 2 years, so-called luxury taxation. Means if the house value is above certain class, and if you buy a house and resell it within 1 year, you have 15% taxation. If you buy it and sell it within 2 years, you have 10% tax extra burden.
The idea being that if you're buying and reselling houses really quickly, you're probably not using it for yourself. It's probably more of an investment.
Yeah. This has been implemented for 2 years. Okay. It has some effect, but not much, because people, first, not many houses on that notch, the high price notch. And people just buy it and hold long enough. So it has been implemented for 2 years now, but I think the effect is very limited. Okay, that's another measure which has been implemented, but people now is talking about raise the tax rate rather than the tax base. Just last week, I think they passed it. The nominal, the tax rate will increase from 1.2 to as high as to 3.6. Okay, sounds great, sounds substantial. But if you don't implement the reassessment, that's 3.6, still nothing to those speculators. As I mentioned, 3.6 probably the real effective tax rate will come down to probably 0.3.
So what you're saying is, unless the housing is assessed at the actual market value, raising a percentage point or two in the tax rate isn't really going to change anything.
Right. So people feel the authority really play the game to give you a lot of promising, but really does not affect much. Okay, That's why I said they are the vested interest people.
So it sounds like your main concerns aren't so much with you think that these policies are flawed. It sounds more like you just don't think that the political will is there to carry them out.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
In general, I'm getting a sense of pessimism from you that these things will get passed or implemented. I'm curious, do you have any thoughts on what it would take for this to gain some momentum? We were talking earlier, and you mentioned maybe if this became an issue during the mayoral campaign or even later during a presidential campaign. Do you think that would be enough to bring some momentum to this cause?
Well, in the last 20 years, after I came back to Taiwan, each time during election time, we have a group of young people then come to the politician to ask them to endorse a check, okay, to make statement after you elect, you do what, and then bounce the check all times, okay. So that's why I'm become pessimistic. Then give promise at this time, anything you say, anything you want, but never implement it.
A lot of people have raised the question of whether or not a steep decline in housing prices would cause economic damage, even a financial crisis. What are your thoughts on that, and do you think that it's possible to carry out the reforms that you're talking about without causing problems in the economy and in the financial sector?
The real most effective measure should come from the central bank, which has three instruments that could affect the housing. One is the interest rate. Second is the bank reserve. Currently it's 25%. If it's raised to 30%, immediately the loan will be declined. The third one is credit control. Okay.
So you're talking about monetary policy measures that the central bank could use.
Yeah. But the central bank also, You can say, oh, they feel the housing is bad, we should do something, but they are very careful on this one because their mission is not to cut down the housing, but rather to stabilize the money supply and the macroeconomics. Okay. So their measurement is effective, but they will not use it. Also, they're worried about what you just said. If the housing price come down too quick, as the Premier
Zhang Yihua.
if he says that the price come down 30%,
Yeah, he was talking about it coming down 30% in 2 years.
if that's true, okay, there will become a disaster.
Mm.
The banking system will collapse. They know that. He knows that.
Mm.
But he knows it will not be really come up true. So that he said it as a political statement. But that raises the issue. We don't know at this high price housing bubble. If I'm the president or the premier, I don't know what exactly should I do. Everybody says should be soft landing. What does that mean? You should come down gradually. How long? 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Come down to how much? But people has on the market is expectation. All right. If you just say come down slowly, cut down 20% by 5 years, but people will immediately react, sell immediately.
So what you're saying is, as soon as the people in Taiwan think that the government is going to take serious action and they really believe that prices are going to come down, even if the government wants it to be gradual, it might be very sudden because everybody's going to realize, oh, prices are going to go down, and everybody starts selling at the same time.
Yeah, just like it has all of a sudden come to another phase.
Mm.
That's the problem. So I really don't know. I don't know how to find the effective soft landing. I think all those politicians, even in China, they don't know how to soft landing. That's the very difficult part of it. Well, don't put me into the position of policymaker. I would like to be an academician to criticize.
That's the 特权, that's the privilege of an academic. Yes. Professor Zhang Yihua is a former National Taiwan University professor with the Graduate Institute of Building and Planning. He also works with the Institute for Physical Planning and Information in Taipei. Professor Hua, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Taiwan Talk. As always, we'd love to hear what you thought of today's program. You can leave us a comment on our Facebook page or rate and review Taiwan Talk on iTunes. This helps us bring you the kind of shows you want to hear and makes it easier for other people to discover the program. For ICRT, I'm Keith Menconi.